Hey designers, and welcome to Real Talk with the Roses. Ready to answer some questions today?
I'm ready.
We're going to tackle some of your tough questions about life, love, sex, marriage, and money, so stick around. So we are back. It has been a while since Real Talk.
A long while.
I don't even remember how long. It's been months, you guys, and I'm not even really sure why. Life got really bad. Well, I got sick. I remember there for a while we were doing them, I had gotten really sick, and we came back and we made one or two with me coming over that. There was the lung stuff that I was having going on, remember? Yep. And then life just got crazy busy during the summer. We took you guys to Louisville with us. We went there during August. And then ever since then, and since we've been home, it has been one thing after another. You've got a new job or new position.
Yep.
So you've been busy. So finally, we have a little bit of time to answer some of your questions. I did put the call for questions out on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So you guys, if you're not following me there, I'll have all the links for you down below. You're going to want to make sure to follow me there because once in a while I do post the call for questions, and we are going to try to get back to doing Real Talk once a week for you all. So be watching for that weekly post because that's where you're going to be able to submit your questions, anything you want to know about life, love, marriage, money, sex, you name it, we'll talk about it. Well, within reason, of course. So let's just go ahead and get started today. We do have a question today, and because we tried to at least keep these somewhat brief, probably only going to get to one question. We do have two questions submitted. If we can get to both today, we will. If not, we'll cover the other one next week. But let's just get to it, shall we? This question comes from Christine Dillard, and she wants to know, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced in your marriage in the past, and how did you overcome them? That's a pretty heavy question.
True.
A very, very personal question. But our life is an open book, is it not?
Most of it.
Most of it is an open book, because I believe the only way that you can really help people is to be honest and open about experiences you've had. So are you up to answering this kind of question?
Sure.
All right. So what were some of the biggest things that we have had to face in our marriage, and how did we overcome them? I'll start with you.
I think the first thing that sticks out is, of course, our immaturity, our youngness.
Yeah, we were super young. How old were we?
I was 19, you were 17.
Young.
A minor.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I think we've told this story before, actually. My parents had to sign permission for us to get married.
Yep.
So for 1 month, you were my legal guardian.
Yep.
Because I was 17, 1 month away from my 18th birthday. So for that month, he was actually my legal guardian. They signed over custody, guardianship to you, because we were young. I graduated in June that year, high school, and then we got married in July. And I got to tell you, we were at the soccer game last night. Bub had a soccer game. He is a junior in high school, for those of you who aren't aware. And I was watching some of those kids out there. I cannot even imagine them being married.
Nope.
I mean, like, to think back and to think that I graduated high school and was married a month later, that is just, that's crazy.
It's hard to believe.
That's crazy. Yeah, so we did have to overcome a lot of immaturity. I don't think either one of us really were mentally prepared yet enough to be married. Do you?
No, because there were still a lot of issues with jealousy and all that young stuff.
Yeah, stuff you go through whenever you're young, that's for sure. We're still together, we'll be 29 years in July.
Yep.
But it has not always been easy.
Nope.
That's for sure. All right, so we had to overcome the hurdle of age. What else would you think was something that we had to overcome?
Of course, one of the next challenges was our money. We had very little money. And of course, that's always tough on a marriage.
Yeah, I think when we first got married, you were making like $180 a week.
I think so.
Yeah, because he was actually a night manager at a local grocery store.
Right.
You had been attending college since you had graduated.
But then I quit college to go work full time.
Yeah, because you knew we were getting married.
Right.
And your goal was to go to the police academy. But I don't know, at that time you still were wanting to go into the ministry. You were wanting to go off to Bible school at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the plan. We were supposed to get married and head off to Bible school, but I've already told them in a recent Cocoa and Cookies that kind of changed. So $180 a week is what you were making. That's it. Because I was working for a little while when we first got married. I worked for the same grocery chain, but in a different city. And through some scheduling conflicts, and my boss not cooperating the way he had promised me that he would before we got married, I just got fed up one day and walked out and just didn't go back. So for a little while, we were down to one income. You're $180 a week.
And then I left that job, making another job, making $6.25 an hour. And we thought that was big money.
Yeah, we did. We thought we had hit the jackpot, boy. Far cry from today, that's for sure. Yeah, that was a little bit of a struggle there at the very beginning. Of course, it wasn't too long that I was without work before I got another job, and I started working full time. And then we did pretty good for a while, because then you had gone full time there at PDM. Well, it was Sheffield still at the time.
Yeah.
And I was working full time, so we didn't really struggle with money for a real long period of time. But when you're young and you're just starting out, because you think you have to have everything right away that your parents spent a lifetime to attain, and so it was frustrating. You know, we were renting a little single wide trailer. You remember that?
Oh yeah. $350 a month.
$350 a month. And the house, though, was completely furnished when we got it. We did not even have our own furniture when we first got married, because the mobile home, when we rented it, she had everything. Beds, the sofa, the chair, the kitchen table, everything was already furnished when we moved in. So we didn't have anything. And when you're young and just starting out, that's, you know, you want so much more. So yeah, that was pretty much a struggle. What are some of the other big things for you, maybe, that you feel like you've had to overcome in our relationship?
Well, I do remember early on too, there were some issues that I had with anger. And
Yeah.
I think that probably just had a lot to do with just growing up and things that had happened. So
Yeah. And it never hit me or anything like that, but there were times that you would take if you had something in your hand, you'd whip it across the room to try to get a point across that you were mad. I was never afraid of him because I'm pretty feisty. Like I would have fought back in a heartbeat if it had actually been that way. But it was just the fact that you would get so angry. But I'm going to tell you how we overcame that, because part of her question was what we struggled with and how we overcame it. And you really struggled with that for years. I mean, it was really when we moved into this home that we got to the root issue behind it. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. And all along, I had told him that I had felt like that the stem of the root of your anger had to do with losing his mom, because you were 11 when your mom got killed.
Yep.
in an automobile accident. And we've shared that story with you before as well. You can go back. I'll have the playlist for you down below to all the past real talks, because some of the stories I don't want to retell again. But you were very young. And unfortunately, the way that their family dealt with that loss was not healthy. Like, your dad didn't let you guys talk about it at all.
No, not much at all.
I mean, it was almost as though it just didn't happen. And it wasn't really like she never existed, because it wasn't that kind of thing, but y'all really just never talked about her. You didn't talk about the incident. Nobody helped you at 11 years old work through that grief and that pain.
Right.
And so for years I suspected, okay, this is because it was just some of the silliest things that you would get mad at. It wasn't even like big things. And so when I finally was able to get that through, like I said it for years, he didn't believe me. No, there's no connection with all that, which a lot of people do. Some of your issues and problems that you're going through have really deep roots that if you'll just get honest, you can get healed of them a lot quicker than if you stay in denial, but it took you a long time to finally listen, really listen to what I was saying. And so we moved in this home that we're in right now in 1998. Your dad had just passed away. And so we were dealing with the grief of losing his dad. And we got in here, and it was just you and I one night. My parents had the kids. We were just sitting here, and a song came on. We were listening to some music, and was it Christmas Shoes?
I don't know.
I can't remember, but I think it may have been the song Christmas Shoes. I'm sure most of you have heard that song by now. And it deals with the little boy who's fixing to lose his mom. And that night, this well of emotions came. You remember that? Mm-hmm. And I mean, he just let it all out. I mean, it was like you were 11 years old sitting right there in that living room. And from that moment on, we talked about it. You talked about her, finally was able to really talk about it and talk about the pain and losing her and all the things really that he had held inside for all of those years prior. Because by this point, you were about 30, 31, close, somewhere in there. So it had been almost 20 years.
19 years.
Yeah. And so all that emotion that had been bottled up for so long, and when you let it out, it was like your anger issue was non-existent anymore. I mean, it was like flipping a switch. And that was a big thing that we did have to overcome, because I could say or look or do just the slightest little thing, and it would just make you so mad. And he couldn't figure out why he was getting mad. But I'm telling you guys, if you're in a relationship where one or the other is struggling with some pretty deep anger stuff, sit down and get honest and look at some stuff that maybe you have stuff deep down inside, because all of that doesn't go away just because you stuff it. It is so important to deal with issues, to get them out, to bring some closure. Otherwise, it's a ticking time bomb just sitting in there waiting to go off, which is what we were experiencing quite often. So, yeah, that was a pretty big one. I'd kind of forgotten about that because it's been so many years since we dealt with that. Yeah. I think for me, one of the biggest things that I had to overcome, and one of the issues that we faced a lot, and we've kind of briefly touched on this before, because I think on a Real Talk, we've talked about the different ways you can have adultery on your spouse. I think we kind of touched on that when someone had asked how to overcome infidelity. You can have spiritual adultery, mental adultery, emotional adultery, and physical adultery. There are 4 ways that you can cheat on your spouse that can cause a rift and cause a breach in the relationship. I guess is really the only way I know how to say it. And when we were young, still in our 20s, you started at the sheriff's department. Mm-hmm. And when he started at the sheriff's department, back at that time, you guys had fixed shifts, and the dispatchers were also on fixed shifts, and y'all shifts kind of went together. Like you had a alpha shift on the road, and you were always going to have the same dispatchers. When you rotated, they rotated with you guys. Right. And, you know, there were times that were necessary for the guys to go in and have to turn in paperwork or whatever, but then there were a lot of times it wasn't necessary, that a lot of the guys would just go and sit around and chit-chat. And especially when you guys were on midnights, because it's late to stay awake. Sometimes you wanted to get out of the car, or just whatever the reasons were. And they would unnecessarily sometimes find themselves up there in the dispatch room. And we found ourselves there where you had started to do that as well. And there were a few of the females there. One in particular that you had developed a friendship, whatever you want to call it, with her. It never was a physical affair, like you never kissed her, never held her hand, none of that stuff. But it came to a point to where she would watch the radio, and wherever he happened to be, she wanted to know why he was there and what he was doing. And of course, that did not sit well with me, because he's my man. And so I can remember specifically when my sister went in to have her first child. It was in 1994, this is how long back this goes. My sister went in to have her first baby, and I'm not even sure why you were in your patrol car, but for whatever reason, you checked out on the radio that you were at the hospital.
I was actually working.
Oh, were you working? Mm-hmm. I couldn't remember. So you checked out on the radio that you had pulled up at the hospital, and almost immediately his phone rings, which I guess, why did she have your number?
I think they all had it because it was programmed.
I don't know why they would have given cell phone numbers to the dispatch, but almost immediately, of course, she didn't know I was there with him. The phone rings. Why are you there? What's happening? Why are you there? And it became this thing to where it really was a challenge in our relationship. It was what I consider an emotional affair with her. And there were a lot of unnecessary conversations with her. She contacted you a lot, but then there were times that you contacted her. He would go in the middle of the night when they were working and sit around and chit-chat and all this pizzazz, you know, and that was a big one. I got to tell you, that was a big one, because when I would bring it up to you, first of all, you tried to deny that it was a big deal. You're like, it's no big deal, we just work together. Denial is always the first sign that something's not right, you guys. And it really became a thing to where, because you guys had gotten to be friends, or whatever you want to call it, you really did not want to sever that contact with her for a long time. I mean, to the point to where it was very hurtful for me that you didn't respect my wishes as your wife enough to cut the contact with her. You were more worried about her feelings and if you cut the contact with her. You remember all that?
Oh, yeah.
So that was a pretty rough time. How would you say we did overcome that? Because I'm sure a lot of people find themselves in that position, especially if you're out in the workforce or even going to school, college, whatever, and you're around the opposite gender. You can be very susceptible to this. You have to keep boundaries up. How did we overcome that? I mean, like, what was the final point to make you realize, wow, this really is inappropriate? And
I guess just us talking about it just made me realize your side, and I just drew a line in the sand and pretty much told her don't cross it.
I mean, this girl went so far as to send you birthday cards.
And I told her to stop.
Yes, but there for a while, the birthday cards kept coming. Of course, she bought gifts for Kristen when we had Kristen. I think by the time we had Bubs,
I don't remember that.
Yeah, she couldn't wait to bring the gift for the baby. And of course, being a wife, it was honestly very hard to accept that gift from her because of the relationship she was having with my husband. And again, let me say this again, it was not a physical thing, but adultery does not always have to be physical, because your spouse can disconnect from you and be miles apart from you even when nothing physical ever happens, because really a relationship is first emotional and mental anyway, before it ever even becomes physical. I mean, it should be. When you're dating, you're friends, you're communicating, you're talking, you're connecting mentally and emotionally long before anything physical happens. So when something comes in that threatens that connection, it's as painful and it is as real as if something physical is happening. So that took a while, and it took a while for me to really be able to trust you being around females at your job, because you had let that guard down, and because there were things that had happened to you. And like, I walked in one night, I'm just going to be real because that's what we are here on the channel. I walked in one night, he was working the desk. Back then you guys had, y'all don't do that anymore, do you? Do y'all have a desk officer anymore? But is he like assigned there?
Yes.
So y'all don't rotate.
Right.
But back then y'all rotated.
Yeah.
So y'all don't have anybody at the desk around the clock.
Nope. Just on daytime hours.
Yeah, but back then you did.
Yeah.
So
till 11.
Till 11. So there would be times that I would get off of work at 5, and not having seen you all day, I would stop by the sheriff's department unbeknownst to him. He didn't know that I would be coming. And I walked in one day, several days I walked in and these girls were in there, the one I was talking about in particular. But this other day, there was another girl that was there, and she was trying to show him how to do something on the computer, and leaning over him with her breast on his back. You talking about seeing smoke? Oh yeah, that was a pretty bad one. So because stuff like that had happened, which let me know, okay, he didn't know I was coming, because had he known I was coming, he certainly would have had her back off. It puts this thing in your mind, okay, what's really happening then when I'm not around? And it speaks to a whole trust thing, which once trust is broken is very hard to gain it back. I mean, it is something that has to be worked on, and it can take a long time to do it. So it's been a process of working through all that, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah.
It was a big process, because during that time you were still having the anger issues. So if I would say anything about it, you would just get mad, fly off the handle, and it was not pretty. Oh my goodness. There's been many times when we both thought about leaving.
Yeah.
You know, and not just saying this is not worth it. Matter of fact, I can remember one time when I was pregnant with Kristen, all this was going on, and it was over this same girl. And he got mad whenever I made a comment to him, and my parents happened to be in town working that day, and I stopped by there to see them. And I told them, I said, if I was not pregnant, about to have this child, I would walk out and never look back, because it was really that much of a struggle for us. It's not always been easy. But I think for me, the biggest thing that's helped us to overcome all that has to be our foundation with God.
Oh yeah.
Because without God, I mean, I know people do it without God all the time, and we're certainly aware that not all of you guys are believers and you don't have a relationship with Jesus, but I can tell you, for us, there were times that on the worst days when I wanted to walk out and was just tired of it, tired of the attitude or tired of the struggle, that it was my desire to honor Christ and knowing that He would honor us if we would honor Him, that kept me hanging on. And if it hadn't been for that, I really don't think we would have made it, do you?
Probably not.
I think we would have just been another statistic. Another statistic. So is there anything else you can think of that's been hard that we've had to work through? How do you think that whole situation I just talked about, because sometimes people hear me talk about that and they feel like I'm dissing you, which I'm not. I'm not dissing him at all. It is just something we walk through that we can use to help other people. But how did all of that situation make you feel? Like, how did you come through all that? Dealing with my anger or my trust issues after that, because it was also hard for you now having to be the recipient of my anger towards those things. It was also equally hard for you.
Well, for me, I didn't totally understand your point of view, because from my point of view, I wasn't doing anything wrong, or I didn't see it as wrong. So it was kind of like I didn't see what the big deal was, because there was nothing physical that occurred. So, and then it wasn't to the point where I realized, okay, yeah, probably the line was crossed, to the point where there was maybe a little too casual of a relationship. And it wasn't until then that I realized, yeah, that was probably stupid.
So how do you think that you finally were able to see my perspective? Or did you at some point try to put yourself in my shoes? Or was it just, like, what was the epiphany for you?
I think just talking about it.
All right, and so what is your advice for anybody who is facing a similar situation, or even if their spouse has just shut them down as far as they're not listening to their pain, they don't want to hear it, they feel like they're doing nothing wrong, and that's just that?
Well, I think persistent communication is key. And what I mean by persistent is just continuing to bring it up, but not in a nagging fashion. Possibly trying to bring in a third party that's neutral in the situation, so they can hear both sides and come up with something that's impartial for both parties to hear. Prayer is always good. For us it works. I can't think of anything else.
Sometimes you have to force the hand at it, though, because I can remember there were times when we were going through the real meat of this issue that you refused to talk to anybody. I would suggest to him, let's get help, let's go talk to somebody, and you absolutely refused. And I don't know, would you say it was either pride? Would you say it was because you didn't want to be told that what you were doing was wrong because you weren't ready to stop yet? Or what was the reason you were so resistant to that? Because I am sure there are a lot of people out there facing that issue where a spouse is refusing for outside help.
For me, I guess looking back at it in retrospect, I would probably say it was more of a pride thing than anything else because I didn't want people knowing our business.
Yeah. And we know what the Bible says before pride. It goes before destruction. And you can let your marriage be destroyed. You can destroy so much in your life just by having too much pride. Or you can just be humble about it and say, yeah, listen, we're in a mess and we got to have some help. We need help. There's nothing, I think maybe sometimes people feel that it's weak to need help.
Yeah.
There's nothing weak about needing help. I mean, for crying out loud, God made us in the way that we need each other. And there is absolutely no shame and should be no humility in asking people for help, but make sure that you're getting good help. Don't go talk to another married couple who may be facing the very same thing you are right now. If they haven't already worked through it, come through it, because all they're going to do is sit there and cry with you, and you're going to feed off of each other, and things are not going to get better. You definitely need to seek good help if you're going to seek help. But sometimes you have to force the hand. I can remember that I told you at one point, we're either going to get help or I'm out of here. And sometimes it requires a brief separation, not with the intention of divorce, but with the intention of, I can't be with you right now because this is not healthy, and we need to separate while we're getting help and working through this issue, because I think your emotions get so wrapped up in it and emotions run so strong that it is hard to sit back and react calmly, patiently, without the nagging or the different things, because your whole being is tied up in it, and it you know what I mean? It like affects you on every level.
Right.
And so definitely seek help if you find your way there. But we didn't. I talked to my mom and dad just a couple of times, but not too much, because you would get angry if I talked to anybody. He did not like it if I talked to people about it, because I guess that pride thing again, I don't know. I did talk to them a few times, but not a lot. I pretty much tried to deal with it on my own through a lot of prayer and really dependent on God, praying that God would change him, and or not change you, but just change that situation, your thought process about that particular issue. And it was not easy, and if I had to go back and do it again, I would have forced your hand at it. And that's one thing that I've learned through the years. With age comes some wisdom. Growing deeper in the Lord comes some wisdom, and the way we counsel people now, deal with it right away. Don't let it linger, because we could have saved several years of a lot of heartache had we just dealt with it sooner. And anyway, thank God for his grace. It's been almost 29 years and we are still together. Yep. And we are happy, and we've made it through, and now hopefully we can help all of you guys make it through as well. I think whenever I look back over all of our years, those really were the major things.
I think so.
I think just for like a lot of marriages, sometimes even small issues can mount up to big ones if they're not dealt with right away. So that's the only other thing that I would say while we're talking about these things tonight, is deal with issues immediately. Don't put them on a back burner thinking you're going to get back to them, because you usually don't. And don't stew on things. Like your personality type, your temperament is, you tend to stew on things. And you can brood for a week or 2 weeks even at a time. And even you've gone so far as not even talking to me. Like hello and goodbye, that's about it. Because you're still brewing or processing. And that is not healthy. I, on the other hand, can be very unhealthy because I'm very explosive. Like right away, we're dealing with it now, and I'm and deal with things, which is as equally unhealthy. So you have to learn how to balance your temperament to be able to have effective communication when a problem arises, and don't let it fester. Because 9 times out of 10, when we sit down with married couples for any kind of marriage counseling, we have discovered that most of them have ended up in our office simply because of something small they just never dealt with.
Right.
And it mounts up and compounds, and one thing on top of another, and then here you go. So, Christine, thanks so much for that question. That was a little thought-provoking. I had forgotten some of those issues. Once you forgive and once you move on, sometimes it's hard to remember. And when we get ready to help people, the Lord has to help us remember some of it so that we can effectively help, to empathize But how was it? Did you enjoy that question?
It was good.
Yeah, it was good, and hopefully it helped a lot of you out. So hopefully we're going to be able to see you back next week. If not next week, then we'll catch you the week after next. We're about to go off for the weekend.
Yep.
A little time away.
Hooray.
Long time coming.
Yep.
It's been a long time since we had time away, so I'm excited. Again, Christine, we want to thank you so much for the question. You guys don't have to wait for the next call for questions. If you can think of something right now that you want to ask us, go ahead onto Facebook or Instagram, find the picture, Real Talk with the Roses. You can go ahead and comment it there and I'll find it, or feel free to email me, DeeVineDeeZine@yahoo.com, and I will be sure to put it in the next video. If it's something you want to talk about privately, then please feel free to message me that as well and let me know that you just need a little bit of private help. But from the bottom of our heart, we thank you for taking a trip back in time. Anything you want to say before we go?
Goodbye.
I think he's ready there, folks. So remember, you were created for purpose, so go and be all you can be. We'll see you next time in the next video.